Hi folks, I wanted to make a video regarding my pure Flicker Strike champion. This is a character I did last league, and I did it again this league to kind of see if Cluster Jewels could some way improve the character. And it is the first character of the league that I can say I did not like Cluster Jewels on. I think they were not all that valuable, and I'll go over a little bit more of that as we go through the character. But for now, let's jump through a map so I can show you why I love a pure Flicker Strike setup. Normally, you see a lot of people running this as a 4 to 5 link. I prefer to do it as a full-on 6 link. It's a little harder to pull off. It's a little gimmicky, but I think the end result is a lot of fun, and I really love playing it. Also, I am not in Melee Splash, so that's the first thing we'll talk about for the character is you do have a little bit of a gem swap between Melee Physical and Melee Splash for the most part when it comes to mapping. Melee Splash just feels a little bit better because you do hit more packs, more of the thickness of it. You don't have to worry about the spread. If I was running a, let's say the Tribal Fury Anoint, I could maybe skip out on Melee Splash entirely. I am not doing that for this character. I was in the beginning until I got more damage, at which points I switched out. But that is something that you kind of gotta get used to. You just, for mapping, put in Melee Splash, and then when you're running big bosses or something, put in Melee Physical. The main feel of the character is you hold down left click, you then pop your Blood Rage, and you walk through the map holding on right click, and everything just dies. It's very good for simulacrum farming because you do basically never stop moving, and as you just pop balls and all that stuff, you kill mobs very quickly, and you can get a massive amount of splinters actually. Something like Tropical Island with Alva and a little bit of juice on it, not anything beyond sack frags or something like that. I do average somewhere in the 50s to 40s, even 60s sometimes of simulacrum splinter drops, which is very nice if you are the type of person that wants to farm those, get those voices. I've yet to get another one the entire league, even though I've run upwards of 50 at this point. I don't know, I'm just unlucky, who knows. But I do love the character for simulacrum farming. It's the reason I kind of made him, as I was getting a little frustrated with the rest of my characters, being a little bit too gimmicky, a little bit too slow to really get the splinter drops that I was looking for. But as you can see right here, my single target is okay with Melee Splash, not the highest, but we are deep into the Delirium. We are hitting a boss and still able to kill it just fine. So like I said, Melee Splash, that swap out, not too big of a deal for the character. But yeah, as far as playstyle goes, that is the way you do it. You hop on through with Leaf Slam, you have a lot of attack speed, you get 36 Simulacrum Splinters, and you just enjoy the game with a big smile on your face. Let's talk about gear. So one of the big things for this character is the fact that we are pure Flicker Strike. We do not have another thing for DPS for single target. We are usually doing that little swap over for Melee Physical, and then otherwise running Impale, Fortify, Awakened Multi-Strike, and Awakened Brutality. Now, I want to preface this by saying that, yes, Awakened Multi-Strike is expensive. I don't think you need it, but it's a very big upgrade for this build as a result of Flicker Strike being my main link. It does add one more flick per frenzy charge, which means that it's a lot easier to sustain on bosses and things of that nature, because I'm going to get away from my portal, it's very loud. Because we do have 10% chance to gain frenzy charge on the chest and 20% on Flicker itself, that means we have a 30% chance per right click to gain a frenzy charge. If we gain a frenzy charge, we then have a 15% chance to gain to our maximum frenzy charges. And that's what makes this build work. This ring with 15%, or if you don't have a Woken Multi, get a 30% version of this ring, will let you do pure Flicker even on bosses. So something like Awakener, I can Flicker Strike with this build, because once you get your full stack one time, you're good to go. You don't have to worry about it anymore. That ring right here is what's making this build functional. So you're going to need one of these, and you're going to need the 10% chance to frenzy charge on your chest. The other thing you can look for is the enemies explode. Now, there's two camps on this. You can go for enemies explode, or you can go attacks have crit. If you want the absolute maximum DPS, you go attacks have crit. If you want to not worry about porcupines, stuff like that, you go enemies explode. So for me, I was doing a mapper for the most part that could sometimes boss. So I went with enemies explode. If I was doing what I did last league, which is a boss killer, then I went with attacks have crit. So whichever one of those you do, grab some Awakener Orbs, smash them together, and see what you get. Now, the other thing that you're going to have to Awakener Orb yourself is the additional Strike Max Frenzy Gloves. I don't know, maybe with Melee Splash being the swap out, you don't need the Strike nearby enemies, but I like it. It's very feel good. I would recommend getting it if you can. So just once again, grab a +1 max frenzy charge, grab a strike glove, smash them together with awakener orbs, and see what you get. You can buy this stuff flat out for exalts if you have it, but they're pretty expensive when they're already pre-made. Saviour is like 6 exalt or something right now. It's ridiculously cheap. It's very much a good time to play with it if you can. If you have the money to build any Saviour build, and you're going to have a great time. Sword, Paradoxica, is cheap. It's like 3 exalt, un-ID'd. This is the one I bought. I got this one. I don't recommend buying un-ID'd because I actually really don't want Blood Rage on this thing. But I got it. It's what I've been using. I haven't really needed to swap out to a new one. It's where we are. Abysses for the helmet is best in slot for DPS, hands down. You can run a normal chest or normal helmet that has life, resistances, all that stuff. Your DPS will be lower by a significant amount, like actually 55% lower. It's pretty ridiculous. But you also aren't like instigated by something hitting you with melee damage. So, you know, there's both sides of the coin there. Boots, I just barely fit in Tailwind. I'm actually 1 off res cap because I'm 76, 75, 76. I'm not 76 on one of my resistances like I wish I could be. Just don't pay attention to that. That's fine. I just barely fit in Tailwind when I did the swap over to Abysses. I leveled this character to 92, I want to say, without Abysses, and then I switched over to Abysses because I needed that damage boost, because I was pushing Simulacrums, I was pushing late game Awakener, wanting to do it a little bit easier, so I switched over to Abysses, and I was just able to fit in the Fortify because I had just enough resistances on my other stuff to be able to catalyst it up. That's why I have catalyst resist on everything. That I was able to squeeze out just enough resistances out of the build and fit in some fortified boots that I crafted. Belt is probably where I would then make up those resistances if I was to try to get more. The belt would be the slot that I could definitely modify, get some resist, you know, drop some of that melee damage during a flask effect, whatever, drop those, and I would have a much easier time piecing this whole build together. One thing you will need, though, is stats. So Paradoxicas, especially if you're going that route, they require 212 dex. It's a lot of dex for a build that is very heavily on this side, and even because I go up a little bit here, I get some. But since I'm not coming all the way up to here to grab these, I don't get that dex. So you are a little dex heavy, which is nice because you do have Abysses, and you do get a dex int amulet. Kind of balances that out, is the reason I have that. For the amulet, I have the Pride Reservation on there. That is very nice because it does let you run Warbanner, Blood and Sand, Flesh and Stone, and Pride, and still have a pretty decent mana chunk left over. So if I take it off, I go pretty low. I'm at 59 versus the 134 that I normally have. It's very good if you can get it. Definitely recommended for the build, just for that little bit of a buffer when it comes to your mana pool. And then, like I said, the ring is key. You need 15%. If you're going to go pure flicker, you need 15% if you're woke multi, 30% if you don't want to do woke multi. And honestly, these rings are like an exalt to 2 for 15 to 20%, 15 to 30%ers. I just got lucky and got a onslaught at max frenzy as well for about like an exalt and a half. So keep an eye out on the rings. You can maybe find one for a good price and just use that instead. But yes, you need that 15%. With Flicker giving you 20, the chess piece giving you 10, this thing triggering, that's all you need. On bossing, you will be able to flicker down bosses, no problem at all. Flask-wise, Basalt, Lion's Roar, that's more damage, more defenses. We got the crit flask because Paradoxic has pretty low crit. If I was to go an actual Val sword or rapier or whatever, then I would have more crit, I'd have more attack speed. Late game, if I was just to keep playing this character, I would switch out the Paradoxica. But for me, it was enough. I was able to do all the content, and that's all I really cared about. And then you got your Quicksilver. Honestly, at this point, because we have Frenzy Charges, because we do Leap Slam everywhere, I could almost just drop the Quicksilver and run something else. You know, if I was really going ham on this, maybe a Bottled Faith would be the better option there, and I could really do some damage to a single target, and it might be beneficial for that in that way, but I just haven't really had a need to go that heavy into it. And then finally, the ring is Assassin's Mark with some resistances and life. It's just a good way of getting curses into the build. Assassin's Mark is an easy curse to get, and you kind of just want more crits, so not really problematic there. We do have that switch out for melee splash, like I was talking about. You don't always need it. It's kind of weird. If there's enough pack size, it'll feel good. So like if you're running a temple, so if you run an Alva map, there it's pretty nice to have because it's condensed pack size and it's very, very good. With you having the additional strike, with you having the Saviour dudes up bouncing about with you, you don't realistically need to swap out for melee splash all the time, but it's a case-by-case basis. If I did not anoint the Fanatic, which I maybe wouldn't have, I grabbed Tribal Fury instead, which is not visible there, but Tribal Fury, the Anoint, that gives you one more additional strike. You could probably drop melee splash in that situation, but you know, it's a little touch and go. As far as the rest of the links are concerned, Leap Slam, Blood Magic, faster attacks, just so that we can Leap Slam everywhere, and our Blood Magic will keep us from using our mana pool, because we do just want that to be on Flicker. We do have War Chief as he pops up and does his thing with then where is my War Chief? There is. War Chief, Impale, Melee Fizz, Ruthless. Just kind of a normal DPS setup for him. I'm not really concerned about what he does. I just want him to be doing something. So that is his little setup. He does a little bit more damage. Gives me that buff. Pop him up on bosses. Let him smash around. Cast on Death Portal is here for kind of a joke, but also because we're wearing Abyssus, because we're going deep into Delirium, there are many cases where I just instantly die out of nowhere. And most of the time that is not because I'm getting hit by something that is on the screen, it's because as pure Flicker, you don't really have a way to avoid volatiles in the way that you do on most builds. So there's a lot of chances where I will kill something, it'll be a volatile, and then I will flick away from it and flick back to it right when the volatile explodes and I just die. So it's kind of a joke, but at the same time, kind of a thing that you need with the way that Delirium League is. Just keep it in mind. Just keep it in mind. Blood and Sand, Blood Rage is, of course, massive for you. Attack speed is huge. And, of course, on mapping, Frenzy Charge on a kill is very, very nice. Blood Sand, of course, more damage. That is the reason I don't want a Blood Rage in my Paradoxica, is because I would like to use my level 20 Blood Rage, not my level 1. But it is what it is. Here we are. Pride, Warbanner, Flesh and Stone, and an Enlighten. I'm only using an Enlighten 2 because I just don't have the int to run an Enlighten 3. If I could maybe grab a piece of int somewhere on my gear, Enlighten 3 for whatever you can squeeze in is probably a little bit better. But for now, Enlighten 2 has been just fine. It gives me a little bit more buffer. It's all about the buffer in this build, of just making sure that, you know, you have enough to Flicker Strike. If you put down a totem and then you pop Blood Rage, you don't want to be and not be able to start Flicker Striking. So that's why I run Enlighten 2 in there. Second Wind, Molten Shell, increase duration. Second Wind apparently helps with the cooldown of Molten Shell, so Molten Shell is on my left click. We got a nice 1700 barrier normally. If we let that go, and then when I'm mapping, I pop my Basalt and my Lion's Roar so that my defenses goes up to there, and then run around, I got a nice 4,500 molten shell shield. Very, very nice. If I see something heavy popping in that's going to do a lot of damage, pop Val Molten Shell in the same way, and you have just an insane barrier that will protect you from most things because you are armor based. And I think that covers all of that side of things. So let's go into the passive tree. Now this passive tree originally looked very, very different because I was a cluster jewel setup, so I didn't have any of this section here. I wasn't going up here, and I actually wasn't going up here either. The thing is, the cluster jewels really don't help enough. So something like deep impacts, I wonder if I still have those. Something like deep impacts in the setup is very nice as far as it looks on paper, right? Yeah, so deep impacts is a chance to impale, and the impale stacks for 1 additional. The problem with this setup is that it takes a lot of points to get it, and you don't get a whole lot of points for doing so. The damage is a little bit better, but because you have to invest in a large cluster, and then if you want to go like medium clusters, which these sounded really good, taunted, crit multi, get some double damage, get some crit chance. I had this whole setup here as a big tree, but in reality, the tree kind of gets more from the normal nodes that are available to you. Nodes like this are so strong that you get more per point by just going for the normal tree stuff, going for these, going for something like Rampart, and then grabbing all of this for attack speed, grabbing that. That makes the build feel so much better to play, and then also round out your HP than it does just going for a large cluster jewel setup. So you can mess around with it. I leveled up till 85, 86, somewhere in there with cluster jewels, and then I just kind of thought they were not worth it. And after switching to this version of it, which is the same version I ran last league, I kind of still feel the same way. Cluster jewels are just not worth running on this setup. Maybe there's some way to make them work, but I don't think this would be the way to do it. As far as how I went the order of operations for the Ascendency, the first thing I grabbed was Unstoppable Hero, so I don't die ever in mapping. Master of Metal, Conqueror, and then Worthy Foe was the last one, so if you're wanting to go that same route, it's kind of just whichever way you want to go. Taunting, of course, does do your hit chance, so you want to grab it at least by Merciless, because it is the only way you really hit things, as naturally you do only have like an 83 to 88% chance to hit things, so you do want to taunt them as much as possible. And other than that, I don't think there's too much for the build to go over. I have done Awakener on him. It's a little finicky because you do have to get that first Frenzy Charge hit. I don't have any footage of that, but you just basically flick them, see if you got the Frenzy Charge hit. If you don't, run around for a bit, flick them again. You'll probably get it on the first 2 pretty easily if you don't cancel it. Something to keep in mind, if you Flicker Strike something and then are holding left click at the same time, you'll actually animation cancel yourself. So you want to hold right click, flicker, see if you get it, and then start moving on bosses. Otherwise, you will just keep animation canceling yourself, which does not feel great, by the way. I did that a lot before I realized that I was doing it. So I highly recommend not doing that. But I would recommend this build to anyone who's looking for quick simulacrum farming, wants to have just kind of an easy breeze through time, an active build that kind of isn't active as you're just holding right click and flicker is taking the wheel, and just want to do something a little gimmicky yet very, very powerful. Highly recommend it. Mine right now I think is doing, what is it, 4.4 million with the Impale. That's not counting in Saviour, so I'm doing like 10 mil, which is not that much. With the current stage, 7.7 if we count in the flash charges, which I usually don't count in. It's not that much DPS when you compare it to what Herald stackers and all that are doing right now, but it's more than enough for the content in the game. You might not run tier 19, 100% deliriums, whatever, that kind of craziness, but for the average player, for the average person, if you want to do something a little gimmicky, if you want to do something a little bit weirder, just doing Flicker Strike, not having that 5 link, not having a 6 link with double strike, this is a build I really, really recommend because it's fun. It's just good, stupid fun. Flicker is always fun to play. Go do it.